Hopkins, remember?
Absolutely. That's right.
Yeah.
Tom Hopkins in Montreal. Yeah. I
Yeah,
saw that crazy woodcut you did for him. I couldn't believe it.
yeah. So it goes back even further.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I think a theme that runs through all this is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Well, Jill,
All of us are capable of crazy.
Jill, are you the crazy Canadian, or we're pushing it a bit too far?
I guess maybe I don't know who I learned it from.
I just think it was your nature got nurtured. That's all.
Yeah,
it's just who you are. So.
Well,
I think so too, but it was also my first project was Randy's undoing. It was Penny Siopis's
right.
sister. You left you left us, I think, a 15 color 4/5 plate with a monotype. That was the first project I ever worked on. So I think maybe you planted that seed a long time ago.
Yeah.
That was 2004.
He established crazy as normal. So.
I think that was it. And that poor old Jill had a rubber stamp. It was a big job you had, Jill. I don't know how many times you had a rubber stamp that edition.
No, the Penny did that. It wasn't me. The small series. No, I had to do the transfers. Randy.
I mean, as an individual. This is a little bit of a family. I mean, I like to think that, all of us who work together and, artists we've collaborated, people who've employed, we have this forever sort of bond. We all have so much in common. And I think we've all more or less enjoyed interacting with each other.
I mean, yeah, I feel like the more open you are in the print world, kind of the more you get surprised. And I think that's what, there's kind of two kind of printers in the world. The ones who are like, this is how it's going to be. And the ones who are like, okay, I'll say yes to anything, and I think we're looking at a group of people who just say yes to just about anything. And I think, we all tend to gravitate towards each other because of that similarity of approach. So I'll never forget James Sienna. I was asking James Sienna about printers once, and he said to me, he goes, I know I'm working with a good printer when I ask them if they can do something and they say yes. And he goes, and I know full well they have absolutely no idea how they're going to do it, but they say yes anyway, and they go home and figure it out. He's like, that's when you're working with someone you want to work with. And I think, that's definitely the standard for all of us. So.
That was something that was so great about you, Jill. You had dropped in it, and you studied, you worked so hard at it, and you really worked it out, even though you sometimes was where you're a bit out of your depth, but you've cracked it in many, and you've done all these great series.
Especially when you're figuring it out, depending on whoever's making a mark, which I think is also incredibly interesting. Part of it is that it's not only the problem solving about the technique, but then it's, this artist has done what? Okay. Let's figure out how to do this. 2 weeks ago, somebody else asked me, can you just color the glue instead of coloring the paper? And I was like, well, can I? Well, of course I can color the glue, but why would I color the glue otherwise? So it's those same kind of little tiny tidbits you learn from everybody. So I learned from Randy, so many different things from Phil, Jack, when Jack was still around. So I don't know. It's this continual kind of learning. And if you don't understand one part of it, you only get good at it when you've practiced it. And if you don't know how to start practicing, you kind of take it all, right?
Yeah. I always go back to because people ask me well, how did I get involved in this? And I was 19 in college, and one of the people I was learning printmaking from, this man by the name of Ken Kerslake, he was amazing printer. He helped move the Intaglio studio to Bob's shop. He was instrumental in helping the founding of Tamarind and stuff like that. So he's a crazy guy. And I asked him, I said, with all of your years of experience, at this point, it's been over 50 years of printing. I said, do you know what it's going to look like when you lift a piece of paper before you lift it? Because to me, I was like, if I'm going to get involved in this seriously down the road, it's like, I don't want to know everything. Because that's the fun part. It's like, what's this going to look like? And he was like, he said, oh no. He's like, you're either horribly depressed or pleasantly surprised. He's like, that's what it is every time you lift a sheet of paper. And I was like, well, I can do this then, because I didn't want there to be an end. I didn't, to that learning and to that kind of discovery process. And I think, what Jill was just talking about with, every time your artist comes in, I mean, they see the world so differently from you, right? And they're coming in with such a different perspective and approach, and they'll ask you the most oddball questions that cause major shifts for you. Like, just like, can you tint the glue? Like, that just made me think about it. I was like, oh, I got some ideas for tinted glue now.
Right?
Just being like, undertone a sheen Calais. I can make that white paper.
It worked really
paint.
nicely, I have to tell you.
Never thought about it, because some artists hadn't asked me this really random question, and you're just like, and that's part of, with us, with working with different people. And I think what's always been great about William is that when he goes out and he comes back and he's worked with somebody else, even if it's not even relative to print, is that he's just willing to hear what other people's opinions are and absorb them. It's like, whereas a lot of artists, their world is really rigid, and his is like permanently flexible, right? Because he's wanting to see what other people have. And I think,
but he also takes an idea and he'll think about it. He learns from all the younger artists in the studio too. He walks straight in, he looks, and he's genuinely interested in everything that was always happening. And then he will plant, it's like a seed is planted. And sometimes it's 2 years later, he comes back and he says, do you remember how somebody carved this lino in this detail? Can we do that with these drawings? And you say, of course we can. And then that's 80 prints, David. That was 80 prints. It was a whole series. Just because.
Was that from that Ryan Aronson lino cut that however many years later? That was
2008, and then the Universal Archive started in late 2011.
Yeah. And that
it was 3 years later, but it was exactly right. And so it was just not taking an idea, but planting a seed that this is how this is going to work for this particular body. I
always got into trouble, as you say, because I always said yes. And Jill and William had this great relationship, and so there were 30 nose prints, and then there were 80 Universal Archive prints, and now there's 6 monster Triumph and Laments prints, and now we're dealing with these very unusual photogravure prints. I mean, it's like each one of these is a big challenge to us, because somebody has thrown something at the printers and at us, and I keep saying yes without knowing where it's going to go. And I must say the Triumph Laments has been maybe it's got a long way still to go. We can't even get it into the gallery. But anyway, no,
I still maintain though that body of work is one of those bodies of work that will be regarded in the long haul as one of the more important bodies of work he's made, and one of the more important kind of touchstone conversation points over time relative to the history of print. And it really, so much of it for me is how it bookends with how print really got going. The first real major change in print was Dürer, and you think about the work that Dürer had done with the Triumphal Arch and how that relates to what William was doing with the Triumphs and Laments. Not just from a process perspective, but for conceptually why these things were made. That's of great value to humanity for the long haul, not just images or art or commodity or anything. That's a cultural conversation. As when you think about the times that we're in right now, where there's a lot of attempt at rewriting cultural history in Eastern Europe, and it's so important that these things are able to survive, that they're prints. That's why they get to survive, and the conversation gets to be had versus something is just blown up and it's gone forever. It burns in a city. And so the fact that they're graphic works means that they have the opportunity to survive and to maintain that conversation. So to me, especially that, which I do not remember, I remember when I walked into the studio, I was in 2017, and I saw that on the wall and I go, that's the best thing you guys have done in 20 years. And Jill's like, what? Because you were in the depths of it at that point, right? You had just finished proofing it. And I was
had the best. A baby.
and you just had a baby. I mean, yeah, we could throw in a lot of things that just happened. But when I saw that on the wall, I was like, that's one of the best things that's been made in a really long time. And I just think people haven't really seen it yet. There's been a lot going on, but it's a print. It gets a long life, so it's going to have its time. But yeah, that particular print and out of the set is the really important one. And like, in the book that's coming out, that we're working on, I try to make that connection. To me, that print is a 20-year thought that got completed. Right. And what you're seeing with Studio Life is kind of an artistic reset in my mind. When I look at it from an outsider's perspective at his work and all of his prints, is that Studio Life is like, I've had this long arc of thought, I've completed it, and now I'm in this place where I'm forced to reevaluate because the world just got shut down. And what he's coming out of this with will be the next 20-year thought in my mind. There's some seeds in there. Because like when I sent William those questions about the Studio Life stuff, and I asked him with the Laocoon image if there was a relationship with Plato's cave, and his response was, "That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that." And you could tell, like, seed planted. It was like one of those questions, he's not gonna stop thinking about that because. And what was interesting that I didn't know about it even at the time I asked the question, and it came out in a conversation with Kim Lee, was that was the only time that sculpture and that drawing were together in his studio, is when those photos were taken, because it was just like shoved in the corner so they could get some other stuff out of the studio so they could then take it apart to send it off to be cast in bronze. So the fact that photograph exists for this one moment even allows him to look back at his own studio in a different way. And that's the Studio Life images are so important for that, because it's also him getting to see himself again in a different way. Right. So I think a part of the point of the films of him interrogating himself is being able to see himself. Like, it's the printmaker in him. I make this thing on a plate over here. It looks this one way, and then I run it through a press and it comes out totally different. It comes out backwards and ink on paper, right? Versus this piece of metal I was working on. And I think, for him, the Studio Life films as well as the gravures will have that sort of print reveal function for him. So I think this body of work is really important body of work too. I think there'll be some really interesting offshoots that occur from this too. It's just, people are just starting to get to work with one another again. So we'll see what happens, because now it's going to get interesting. It's because now
there's been some sort of extended listeners, which I'm very appreciative of, and I hope they've enjoyed. I feel this is like a family of four at the top of the screen of mine, and
exactly.
We're sort of, we're bonded together with paper or glues or collage or whatever.
It's probably solvent fume.
By the way, Southern Graphics next week. I'm actually doing a talk on William's work on 3 of the projects that I've done with William over the Xeno writing, the receiver book, and the Ivory Press publication, the 20 stereoscopic gravures. So that's next Friday.
Where is Southern Graphics?
Is that going to be online available to
I'm doing it virtually. I was planning to go out, but then I'm still kind of spooked about traveling, during the pandemic period. So I'm doing it virtually. We're recording it this weekend, and then it'll be presented next Friday.
Make sure we all get links to it so we can make sure people
are setting that up.
Yeah. So that way we can spread around, because, it's always amazing to get the extra input, the behind the scenes.
I'm actually glad to have been here, because David, you talking about us starting, I'm going to be talking about that, how it all got started, and then Xeno writing and setting up the shop, and then moving into the receiver book with Sue Gozen and that production, and then going into the Ivory Press book that I did a couple of years ago. So
Randy, you were quite a brave guy coming down to Africa in the, what was it, 2000?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people thought you were crazy, the most dangerous part of the world. But
yeah, I remember I used to walk back to the residence from the university at night, just walking rather than driving or taking a cab or anything like that. And everyone told me I was insane to do that. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
No, it's great though.
Sometimes that's insane. That was right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but it's great.
I also remember just before I left that first time, they had some of the artists had a party for me, and I
Oh, yes,
remember,
I remember that as well. Yeah.
I remember talking about incidents that happened. I was actually the second trip, and Willem Bossoff was like, "Yeah, I've had 8 cars stolen," and then everybody started unloading about all of these bad things that have happened to them in South Africa, and I was like, "Whoa, this is crazy," and that kind of feeds back into what you said earlier, Phil, about even though this stuff exists there, I really found all the people that I came in contact with on my stays there were really, really, really great people and very optimistic. And, they just plowed ahead through diversity and discomforts and whatnot, and that made you feel really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain to people if they haven't been there. I think, as an outsider coming in, you notice it more than say if you live there. But like as a full-time South African, but it's something that I think, I had this crazy conversation with a South African on an airplane back once from Johannesburg, and he was like, "Yeah, we're thinking about moving." He's like, he was a screenwriter and he did a lot of film editing, and he was like going to New York for like some job thing, and and I was like, "Well, where would you move?" And he's like, "But that's the problem." He's like, "I could never live in the States. It's too first world. There's too many rules." And he's like, "And I couldn't live," and he like named some other places. He's like, "That's too third world." He's like, "There's no real second world in between where you can kind of just, anything can happen." And I think that what he was worrying about, lamenting, was the fact that, in South Africa, because of part of the looseness of it, or what you could call the chaos of it, that meant anything is actually possible. You can actually do anything. Whereas when you come to other places, there's all these hurdles that are put up in front of you to getting something done. And so he was just like, "I don't know where I can live." He's just like, "I don't know what I could do." He's like, I can't live with like, I'm not allowed to make a U-turn in the middle of the road right here because I'll get a ticket. He's like, "What is that all about?" So like this idea that I think, that never left me as being a really good way of trying to explain South Africa's kind of position and growth as a national identity in the world, was that not wanting to be held back, but not necessarily wanting to stay where you are, so, it's that weird position to be in. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal place. So for those of you who are still on, who have not been to go see David in Johannesburg, now's your chance.
Go.
Just say yes. The hardest part is the flight getting there. So
It's actually easier now.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
much
they're
easier now.
direct flights, yeah.
yeah, I bet it is. I bet nobody's going right now.
It is.
Yeah, I used to do the 18.5-hour direct ones.
Oh
So,
God, yeah. No, it's a bit quicker. Well,
Hey,
Phil,
that's much better than all the skipping.
Yeah.
I just be on this one tube for 18.5 hours. So
Anyway, we got two new workshops on the horizon. There's Jill, who's there busy, and Phil, yours coming up. Randy, is Rutgers still? You still the duty? What is the situation at Rutgers? Are you?
Well, the Brodsky Center was shut down by the dean a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah, don't tell us again about that story.
Yeah, and
Terrible.
and so they moved. Actually, they were swallowed up by the Philadelphia Academy of Fine Arts. So they're in Philadelphia now. I'm still publishing, but the dean asked me to stay on here, and we restarted a new collaborative program called the Rutgers Print Collaborative. And so we're basically working with like 1 or 2 artists a year, and again, to some degree, with an artist with a kind of a social agenda within their work. So so we've done about 6 projects right now, and we're working currently with a African-American artist. Her name is Nancy, and I have yet to learn the pronunciation of her last name, but she's basically from Zimbabwe, but resides in the States, but she's currently working in Berlin for a year. And so we're working on a kind of a long distance project with her, which hopefully I'll be editioning this summer. And then we'll probably start another project again in the fall. So it's a lot less hectic print schedule than we had when the Brodsky Center was here.
Yeah, no, there's many stories. I mean, how your Gallimander Press kept getting artists coming from Rutgers and other places,
Yeah,
because their printers were sort of either traveling abroad in paper making or falling pregnant or whatever. So
right.
the artists coming through Gallimander Press were really interesting.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
fact, I mean, the name still exists, which is great. I mean, it's
Yeah, well,
Gallimander,
yeah, I guess it still exists in some
the
people's
history.
memories.
yeah, well, in our lives, it's all pretty, it's all very clear. And but just that, yeah, there's so much to talk about. But you guys want to go home? I mean, you are home, or no?
Well, I'm at work, and
You
I'm
guys, yeah, you're all actually you're also at work, aren't you?
I'm at work too.
Yeah, I am.
So,
That's what it is. And
well, you're the one who's 7 hours ahead and gets to have the wind
Yeah.
down.
Well,
So,
well, it's been so, there's so much to keep sharing and learning, which is what it's been so fabulous about being in the print arena. It's such a collaborative area, and these little things that are shared, and little, skills that are and ideas that come from someone said, have you read the book, or have you seen this, or whatever that. And then we become a channel to an artist who might bring that into their work. It's just it's such a connected arena. And, we just hope more and more artists begin to understand the value of printmaking in their oeuvre, because not many, I think, get the opportunity to do it because it's become very, very expensive.
yeah, that's for me the big problem with the field is that the cost of production has risen beyond what we're currently selling prints for, which limits who gets access to print. And I think the earlier an artist gets access to printmaking, the better their career is in general. I think they become better artists. I think we see that time and time again throughout the history of print. The artists who started prints early on, and it became a very standard part of their practice as an artist throughout their life. Their work really evolves because they're not making work wholly in a vacuum. They get that time to make work with other people. So I think it's a cultural disservice. Pardon?
You learn so many different skills.
Yep.
Like so quickly.
An artist has to learn what's
the same
important.
as I wanted to say on some of those really big projects too. How many artists have learned in that process? All those carvers, everybody working on those projects, a lot of the young artists that started carving on Williams Universal Archive years ago are now working at the DKW studio and have been for 5+ years. It's kind of, you're teaching them how to use their hands. You're teaching them their muscle memory. You're learning everything that you can all at once. It's fantastic spaces.
And it's
the
not
fact
practice.
that if you can't, sorry?
And it's not practice, it's real. It's like, it's not like you're in school
And
where
it's
you're just doing this thing. Right. So it's real experience. It's not, I think that's the difference, for the student environment versus the apprenticeship environment, is that it's real. And it has the pressure that you're talking about, Jill, that's put on it is what makes it more impactful. Right.
Yeah,
because
don't mess this up.
Yeah, well, there's not even an option to mess it up. That's just like, that's what I'm always saying. Like when people say, oh, like failure is good. I'm like, no, failure is not an option. I'm like,
It's not an option.
if it
You
doesn't
have to
work,
push
you
through
just
this.
do something else. Like the concept of failure, it's not on the table for me. It's like, well, it didn't work, so we're going to do it another way. It needs to work, So yeah, you just got to take it off the table, So I think that's really important. Because that failure thing is out there in the common vernacular. I'm like, it's really more about being willing to being open to being educated, being open to having to change your perspective. That's really what you're trying to get people to talk about, not failing and giving up. So I have a hard time with that as a concept that people talk about all the time, because there's a lot of negative connotations versus just saying, nope, just change course, try it a different way, go back at it, get back up, like failing's when you might as well be dead at that point. So, it's like, it's the end of the road.
Oh, listen, I gotta go because I've got to help
Yep.
some students here with some printing things. So I'm gonna
Say
say my
goodbye.
goodbye. It's great to see everybody.
Likewise. I'm glad you
Nice
could
to
join us,
meet you.
Randy.
Thanks for joining. It's been a lovely party besides everybody. It's nice to all see each other on one screen and chat. We should
Exactly.
do it
Yeah.
again, Phil.
We
All
will.
right.
We'll do it again soon.
Take
Okay,
care.
bye, guys.
Bye.
Jill, take good care. Love to everybody.
You too.
Yeah,
there.
you guys too. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Jill.
Bye.